Right, deputies, I'm going to make a start because I think we will have more people, but the amount of people waiting to get in has slowed down. So thank you so much for bearing with me, and apologies to those deputies who have been waiting, but we're just going to now make a start. So thank you very much. Welcome again to our board meeting today. As I said before, it is a record. We've had 235 deputies register for our Zoom board meeting today. So I want to thank you all for your commitment and wanting to join the meeting. Can you please all refer to your tech notes if you've got any queries, and Judy Stilkoff will be able to answer them. Can I also remind deputies, when you speak, you are responsible for your own conduct. So I just want to be able to make that clear to you. I can see a hand has gone up. I don't know if Talofa meant to put his hand up before the meeting started, if he's raising a point of order, but if he is, could he please contact Gillian Meron just to ascertain that, because we need the meeting to go underway. Can we just confirm item 3 on the agenda, the board meeting minutes of the 13th of September 2020. These have all gone out to deputies. I haven't had any written comments. Can you please make it known whether or not there are any comment that you wish to make, or otherwise I will take the minutes as approved. Talofa's still got his hand up, so I am going to ask him if he does have a point of order. Could he please confirm?
Good morning, Marie. Yes, point of order. I think you advised me to contact Gillian, but it relates to my point of order that the chat is disabled, and I would appreciate if you can enable the chat so deputies can write and communicate throughout the meeting. I can't contact Gillian even if I wanted now.
I'm very sorry, but it has been a policy, and it's not something I can deal with now to disable the chat. So I'm not able to do that. So I'm apologies if you want to discuss it with Gillian, but I would need to get on with the meeting. I apologise for that because we've got an awful lot to go through. I don't think it is a point of order, but that has been, I appreciate that's something that you feel strongly about, but I need to be able to press on with the meeting. So apologies, and I'm not able to do that, but you can contact, a message just come up, Gillian via chat. So could you perhaps do that, Tal? So thank you. I've taken the board meeting minutes of the 13th of September as approved. I'm going to try and move on as swiftly as I can because we do have a very full agenda, and I anticipate that deputies may want to speak about the events of this week. So I want to try and make sure that we've got enough time to do that. Let's look at some happy news. The Board of Deputies is 260 years old. I think that is absolutely amazing. And whatever we think of the Board of Deputies, we are the envy of other faith communities. We should be rightly proud of the democratic representative nature of our organisation. And I want to be able to read to you the board prayer, because I think this is a very, very special day. And then we're going to show a video presentation to you. So I will read the board's prayer, and sorry that I cannot be upstanding to you all. Avinu Sheva Shemayim, our Father in heaven, grant to us and to all the communities of the house of Israel, strengthen us and give us courage. Make known to us your ways and teach us paths. Grant life and peace to Her Majesty the Queen, and bestow upon her blessing and prosperity. Guardian of Israel, who sets free the bound and supports the fallen, we beseech you in your abundant mercies to relieve the oppressed, set free those who are held, and bring them forth from trouble to deliverance and from captivity to redemption. Grant peace, quietude, and safety to the Holy Land, bring an end to the distress of all its people, hasten salvation, and kindly deal with salvation. V'namar, Amen. Thank you. And could we please play the video presentation, which will be 4 minutes? Thank you.
I am delighted that we are celebrating the 260-year history of the Board of Deputies of British Jews. So how did our story begin? With the ascension of King George III in 1760, when England's Sephardi community convened a meeting on the 3rd of November 1760, involving 7 of its deputados, Portuguese word for representatives, to express their loyalty to the new king and to raise the most pressing issues facing the Jewish community. The Ashkenazi community set up its own committee, and they started to consult each other about urgent political matters. They eventually decided to unite, and this body was called the London Committee of Deputies of British Jews. And the Board of Deputies has been active ever since. Here are just some of the key moments from our long history. In 1840, President of the Board, Sir Moses Montefiore, pleaded the case of persecuted Jews in Damascus, who were the victims of a blood libel, marking the start of the Board's active role in international Jewish affairs. In the 1880s, we worked at the Board of Deputies to alleviate the plight of poor Jews in the East End of London. In 1905, we campaigned against the Aliens Bill, which was aimed at stopping Jews from entering the country. The bill did become law despite the best efforts of the Board of Deputies. In the 1930s and 40s, the Board's Jewish Defence Committee worked against fascism through lobbying, anti-defamation publicity, and campaigning against members of the community from attending fascist meetings. And in 1965, lobbying by the Board of Deputies led to Jews being protected from discrimination by law in the Race Discrimination Act. From the 7 deputados of 1760, the 300 deputies of 2020, we have developed to represent nearly 200 synagogues and communal organisations covering the political, religious and geographical spread of British Jewry. We are now going to hear from the current and most recent past presidents about the highlights of their presidency and their hopes for the Board of Deputies in the next 260 years.
It's really difficult to say what was one particular highlight of my term as President of the Board of Deputies, because there were frankly so many.
When one of our great political parties was taken over by a clique with a mindset that was deeply racist and strongly anti-Semitic, our community stood up to it. I believe that we helped change the course of British history.
I got to meet in my time both popes, the Queen several times, lots of prime ministers, heads of state, a fellow called Joe Biden.
Absolute highlight has to be the event at Buckingham Palace when Prince Charles hosted volunteers.
It was really good to reinstitute the annual meeting of the Jewish community with the Prime Minister and to lead the delegation.
Why am I proud of the board? Well, there's many things that the board does and is which are worthy of being proud of.
It is the authentic voice of British Jewry.
It represents the entire community. It's a parliament, a forum.
I wonder whether those deputados who first met back in 1760 imagined that 260 years later, the organisation of which they were the seed, the founders, would continue to do way beyond what they perhaps can ever have imagined that it would.
The board is a place for unity and debate, and I'm so proud that democracy goes right to the heart of our organisation.
What are my hopes for the next 260 years? Well, that's an easy one. I want to see a Jewish community that holds up its head in pride.
And I want it to continue to play a leading role in combating anti-Semitism, hatred and extremism.
That there will be a strong Jewish community in this country, and that the board will still be at its centre.
I'd like to see continual engagement with those people on the edges of the community, that's on the very orthodox side, and also with the younger people.
I am so proud of all that it has and will achieve. Every day is unique and different, and I am honoured and privileged to serve you all.
Time.
60 years.
Thank you, and well done, team, for making that video happen. In particular, I think thanks goes to Lauren Keelis. So thank you very much for that. Moving on, we have a guest speaker who's going to speak to us, Dr. Daniel Tillers. He is a Krakow-based historian. He did his PhD at Royal Holloway, University of London, with Professor David Cesarani. The board's own archives were an important source for his book, British Fascist Anti-Semitism and Jewish Responses, 1932 to 40, and it's based on his PhD, and his article, Neville Lasky, Anglo Jewry and the Crises of the 1930s, highlights the role of a previous president of the Board of Deputies, Neville Lasky. So many thanks to you, Dr. Daniel Tillers. I hand the floor to you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Can you hear me okay?
We can, loud and clear. Thank you.
Great. So congratulations on your anniversary today. I've been asked to talk briefly, and I will try to keep it brief, less than 10 minutes, but I understand there will be time for questions afterwards, about the response of the board to the emergence of a domestic British fascist movement in the 1930s. In particular, of course, that means Sir Oswald Mosley and the British Union of Fascists, the Black Shirts. Today, when we think about British Jewish anti-fascism of the 1930s, what comes to mind above all, of course, is the Battle of Cable Street and the kind of action that it represented. Assertive, confrontational, even aggressive and sometimes violent response to the encroachment of this fascist threat into areas of Jewish habitation. The board is often absent from this story, or where it is mentioned, it's often viewed negatively. So it's seen as, and in particular its leadership is seen as apologetic, timid, passive in the face of this fascist threat, and also as having been out of touch with the community. It's seen as having tried to prevent Jews from confronting the fascists rather than supporting them in doing so. And this is also tied into the larger context of the time and the divisions that were emerging in Anglo Jewry between Zionists and non-Zionists, between the new, more recently immigrated Jewish community and the older establishment, between richer and poorer Jews, and between Jews of the left and the right. There are many elements of this image that are true, but it really only tells part of the story, and I argue quite a small part of the story. A lot of our understanding of this period, and especially in British Jewish sort of collective memory, is based on the accounts of those who were on the front lines. So Jews who were involved in active, often aggressive, confrontational forms of anti-fascism, often, of course, with a left-wing character as well. But if you, in addition to that, look through the archives, the contemporary evidence of what was taking place, it reveals a different and much broader picture of what was happening, in particular what was happening behind the scenes at the time, which wasn't readily apparent to contemporaries. This includes the board's own archives, as was mentioned. And one problem was, for a long time, the board's archives, especially the board's defence archives, were not easily available to researchers. I was one of the first, really, probably the first, to comprehensively look through the board's defence archives, which were kept separate from the board's main archives. But also from a range of other sources, including official files at the National Archives in Kew, but also documents from many anti-fascist groups as well, which show a slightly different picture of what was taking place over the 1930s. And in fact, what emerges from this is that the board's response was highly active. It was not passive in the face of this threat. It was very well informed, including as a result of the fact that it infiltrated agents into fascist organizations in the 1930s, including Oswald Mosley's BUF. It was also very effective in combating the threat of fascism. And last of all, it also actually helped to bring the community together on this issue. And so let me just kind of expand on that a little bit. I'll start probably in 1935 to 1936. The BUF, Oswald Mosley's party, had been founded in late 1932. Initially, it had pretended not to be anti-Semitic, and eventually it had revealed its true nature. But what happened in 1935 and 1936, I'm sure many of you know, is the beginning of the so-called East End campaign, when the Black Shirts, Mosley's group, started to bring their activity directly into areas of high Jewish population, in particular the East End of London. And this was a vicious campaign of Jew baiting that brought the threat directly to Jews. In response to this, of course, many local Jews began to take to the streets to disrupt, to protest, and sometimes attack fascist meetings and other events. The board itself took a different approach, and it had three main prongs of its policy. And the first two of these took place largely behind closed doors for reasons that will probably become obvious. The first of them was intelligence gathering. The board sent observers to fascist meetings. It intensely monitored fascist publications, what they were doing, what they were saying. But also, as I said a moment ago, it infiltrated fascist groups themselves. It hired an ex-special branch officer to assume a false identity, and he successfully gained membership of a number of extremist organizations, anti-Semitic, fascist, far-right groups. There's also evidence that from the archives that it paid at least one senior member of the BUF for information about what was taking place behind the scenes. The second strand of activity was intensive lobbying of the authorities for action. The board and its leadership, and in particular Neville Lasky, the president in the 1930s, met with senior figures from across the government, the Home Secretary, police, but also other political figures from across the spectrum, including many local leaders in the East End of London as well. One thing that gave Lasky, the president, a great amount of leverage was the intelligence gathering that I mentioned. The Board of Deputies quite probably had the best intelligence and understanding of the fascist threat in the 1930s of any organization. It was actually providing information to the Home Office, to the police, that they were not aware of. And this gave Lasky great leverage in his discussions and in his demands. He made very clear that what the fascists were doing was unacceptable, was a threat to Jews, but also to others. And he made very clear and specific demands about how they should be policed and ways in which this threat could be combated. And very often we see evidence that after meetings with the Home Secretary or with the Chief of the Metropolitan Police, we see evidence that this translated into orders being passed down, toughening up the approach of the authorities towards the fascists and the threat that they posed to Jews. The third and final strand of the board's approach was anti-defamation work. This was publications, hundreds, if not thousands, of public meetings being held to try to respond to, address, and neutralize the anti-Semitic propaganda that Mosley and the fascists were spreading. Very often, historians have acknowledged this. This was the one part of the board's activity that was public and visible. And it's often been criticised as being apologetic, and often even in some ways as indirectly conceding the ground to the fascists and trying to improve Jewish behaviour in response to fascist accusations. There is probably some justification to that criticism. On the other hand, it's important to take it in the context of the time, and there were great demands both from Jews but also from non-Jewish allies for the board to be taking the lead and trying to respond to fascist propaganda, disinformation that was being spread at the time, and the boards responded to that. The one thing that was obviously missing from the board's strategy was confrontational anti-fascism. It did not want and it discouraged Jews from participating in disruption of confrontation with the fascists and their events. The board and its president Lasky's reasoning here was that this kind of activity often did more harm than good. Lasky himself was empathetic. He himself had attended a BUF meeting. He then wrote personally afterwards in a file that he'd, quote, needed all my self-restraint to refrain from physical violence. So he understood very well how provocative, insulting, harmful the fascist activity and propaganda was. But he feared that if Jews were dragged into and responded to this provocation, as the fascists wanted them to, this created a vicious circle of violence. It would draw attention to the fascists, and it would also superficially substantiate this narrative that the fascists tried to create, that they were the victims of Jewish attacks and they were only defending themselves. Obviously, this approach, whether it was right or wrong, didn't make the board very popular with those on the front line, especially in 1936 during the East End campaign by the BUF. They wanted to defend themselves, and they wanted the board to support them in this. But what we actually see is that over time, and over a very short period of time, the board's approach not only began to be vindicated, but it was also even adopted by many of the anti-fascists who had previously opposed it. And this happened in particular after the Battle of Cable Street. We remember Cable Street today as a great victory, and of course in many ways, and certainly on the day itself it was. The fascists were stopped from marching through the streets of East London. This was a great morale boost for the anti-fascists, and of course still today it's a great sort of central point in British Jewish identity and assertiveness against this fascist threat. But very soon, although it was a short-term victory, in the medium term, it quickly became apparent that the Battle of Cable Street had had negative effects. It was exploited by the fascists in their propaganda to present themselves as British patriots being prevented from marching through their own streets by this alien mob of Jews and communists, as Mosley put it. And of course, however false this narrative was, it was effective. After Cable Street, in a short period of time, about 2,000 new members joined the BUF in London. This was a huge boost to what was a declining movement at the time. And worst of all, from the perspective of the Jewish community, fascist anti-Semitism increased after this. There's a quantifiable, and I've quantified this in my in looking at fascist propaganda, a quantifiable increase in fascist anti-Semitism after Cable Street, but also an increase in violence against Jews in the East End of London as well. And what we actually see is that even the Jewish People's Council, this was this mostly left-wing organization that led this activist anti-fascist approach among Jews and others in the East End of London, and it had been one of the main organizers of the Battle of Cable Street. Even the Jewish People's Council began to realize that confrontation with the fascists could have these negative effects. In 1937, so the year after Cable Street, one of the JPC's leaflets said the BUF's purpose is to cause disorder and incite breaches of the peace. Confronting their meetings or disrupting their meetings is just the denial of free speech that the fascists want. Do not fall into their trap. So the main organizer of the Cable Street demonstration was now actually arguing that Jews should not fall into the fascist trap by confronting them. And in 1938, the chairman of the JPC said there was now actually, quote, no fundamental difference in our policies between them and the Board of Deputies. And this marked a big change. What happened from 1936 onwards was that these activist Jewish anti-fascists started to move away from confrontation, and they began to enter into discussions with the Board of Deputies. They started negotiating behind the scenes, eventually in public, and finally they started working together. So the JPC, the Jewish People's Council, the organizer of the Battle of Cable Street demonstration, began distributing Board of Deputies anti-defamation literature. They began sharing platforms together to speak to East End audiences. And across the rest of the community, almost all parts of the Jewish community in Britain, all the main factions and groups in the community came to support the board's defence policy. Even if they continued to disagree on many other things, and they did disagree on many other things, they realised that they had a common enemy in Mosley and the fascists, and they had a shared interest in fighting this. And they also came to agree that the board and its approach was the best means of doing this. And the last thing I'll say is that this approach was highly effective. British Jews can be proud of the fact that they were one of the leading forces, if not the leading force, in neutralising the threat of British fascism in the 1930s, in making sure that Mosley remained a fringe figure. On the one hand, from the top down, the board countered the fascist propaganda. It lobbied the authorities very effectively for action. But then lower down at the grassroots, Jews were out on the streets spreading this message, countering the fascist propaganda. And even the confrontational approach, even though in some regards it had negative consequences, in other regards it was very positive. It helped to expose the fascist true nature, their violence, their anti-Semitism.
Daniel, I'm really, really sorry to interrupt you because we've gone considerably over time and we're in a very tight agenda. Okay. And I could listen to you all day, but what about we host a special podcast where we invite deputies, and perhaps you could speak to us all for longer about the history, because I know a lot of us would really like to hear it and ask you lots of questions. But I'm really sorry, we're so pushed for time and we've gone quite over that. I'm going to have to. Could you just bring it to an end? We will arrange something else. I'd be really happy to
that
do
was
that.
My final. That was literally my final sentence. So absolutely fine to stop, and I apologise for.
No, your passion for it is greatly admired. Thank you.
No problem.
You're getting lots of virtual claps, I think, from lots of deputies. I can see loads and loads of claps. Thank you very, very much. And what we'll do, as I say, we'll arrange a special evening with you, and we'd like to hear more, and I'm sure you'll get loads of questions and answers. And thank you for your time. We're really grateful. So thank you, Daniel. Thank you. Moving on. We're going to show you now, and forgive me, deputies, for trying to be as swift as possible, because I know people will want to talk. We're coming up, as you know, soon to election time, and every week we're having more and more organisations wanting to join the board. I think we've currently got about 12 organisations waiting, and we've got a vote coming for 2 shortly. We're now going to show you an animated video for 5 minutes on how to elect a deputy. Thank you. Well, thank you. I hope all deputies can see that we're becoming increasingly techie, and we're very proud to see democracy in action. This film is the first that we've ever made. It's going to help with onboarding and all organisations to know what they've got to do to elect their deputy, and it will be going out to schools and deputies. So please feel free to contact Gillian or Judy. They'll be delighted to give you this this short film. So thank you very much. Moving on to the agenda, the next item now, and I'm getting some comments. I'll just give you some feedback in the chat. A couple of people wanted David Tillis to continue, so that we will then proceed to arrange that. We've got some comments about the background. Well, I'm very sorry, we'll have to have a look at that. And some people have come back on the chat saying deputies have been elected for years, everyone knows how to do it. Alas, I'm afraid from our experience, just to give you feedback, that simply isn't true, and there have been lots of deputies that don't know how to get elected, and we do have a lot of new organisations. So I appreciate it's not something for everyone, but I think we will find that lots of people will be very interested in seeing this, and it will make life easier, and new deputies know what the organisation is about. Now, we've got two organisations, moving on to item 6, waiting to join the Board of Deputies. These two organisations have been recommended by the Constitution Committee. What we're going to do is we're going to let the organisations, Harif and Jay Living, do a short introduction, and they're going to have 3 minutes to do that. We'll have 5 minutes for questions and 2 minutes for the vote. And if we go a long time over, it's going to cut into the rest of the time, which is a matter for deputies in the meeting. So can the first introduction, Lynn Julius, could Lynn Julius please introduce Harif? And Lynn Julius is the founder and CEO of Harif. Over to you, Lynn.
Thank you. Can you hear me, everybody?
We can hear you.
Wonderful, and you can see me. That's all right. Okay, well, thank you very much, Marie, for inviting me to speak, to introduce my organisation, Harif. I'd like to wish the Board of Deputies a very happy 260th anniversary, and I find it appropriate that the board that was founded by Sephardim should be considering the admission of a Sephardi and Mizrahi organization for membership. Harif was founded 15 years ago in 2005. We are the UK Association of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. Harif was registered as a charity in 2019. Harif is dedicated to promoting the history, culture, and heritage of Middle East and North African Jews. Few know that ancient Jewish communities predating Islam by a millennium produced the Babylonian Talmud, great rabbis, doctors, thinkers, and poets. In modern times, Jews made important economic and cultural contributions to their home countries. Few in the West are aware that Jews were an integral part of the Middle East and North Africa before they fled their homes in the second half of the 20th century. Over 2,000 years of Jewish history in the Middle East and North Africa came to an abrupt and tragic end just 50 years ago. Jews departed for Israel and the West, leaving an enormous cultural, social, and economic void behind. In another 20 years, few Jews who were born in these countries will still be alive. A vital chapter of Jewish identity, history, and culture, an entire civilization, will be lost. Harif organizes a broad range of events to educate about the history and culture of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. Lectures, discussions, films, book launches, cookery demonstrations, concerts. We have been invited to synagogues, churches, schools, universities, and Limud. We have organized many of our events together with the leading cultural institute, Spiro Arc. We have also worked with JW3, the Jewish Music Institute, Sephardi Voices, Sephardi Renaissance. We have a website, harif.org, and we send out a monthly newsletter. We have held events at dozens of synagogues in London, Sephardi, United, Reform and Liberal, and all around the UK, including Birmingham, Brighton, Cambridge, Henley, Leeds, Leicester, Liverpool, London, Manchester, Oxford, Southend. In Scotland, Dumfries, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Inverness. In Northern Ireland, Belfast. Several events were arranged with deputies. On Monday, the 2nd of December, we will be partnering the board and the Israeli embassy in an important commemoration of the exodus of Jewish refugees from Arab countries. Past presidents and HOs have attended our events as invited guests, including Edwin, Sheila, and Stuart. We have links with other oppressed minorities and recently worked with B'nai Brit to set up the Foundation for Religious Minorities in order to publicize their plight. During the pandemic, we have arranged some 30 Zoom meetings or lockdown lectures, 1 a week. Membership, we are a non-membership organization with a live mailing list of 2,300, of which around 1,700 are in the UK and primarily Jewish. Attendance at our events has been up to 300 for live events. Our lockdown lectures have each attracted up to 500 viewers. That's live on Zoom and also on Facebook and YouTube. We have 6 active volunteers. There's myself, Lynn Julius, I'm the CEO, Michelle Huberman, our creative director, Alan Gaon,
Doron Amber,
director. Our trustees are Ralph Assor, Sydney's brother, Sandra Dangour, and Lawrence Julius, who is also our treasurer. We would welcome more volunteers to come forward and help us. Any active volunteer or trustee would be eligible to stand to be the Harif deputy. Our deputy would be elected by the trustees and the active volunteers. So why does Harif want to join the BOD? It would enhance our status and raise awareness among deputies of our community. It would represent Sephardim and Mizrahim. Some may already belong to synagogues, but their specific interests might not be adequately represented by them. Others might not be synagogue members at all. Harif joining the board would be in line with the board's policy of diversity and inclusivity. Thank you very much for your support.
you're on red. Thank you. Well, we put the clock up, so we try to keep you to time. Thank you very much. Lawrence there will understand about that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We practiced to keep to 3 minutes. Sorry, we're 5 seconds over.
Thank you. Right, we've got some questions. I've got two questions, 3 questions. The first question is Andrew Gilbert. Could you please unmute, please? And can I remind deputies, if we go over for a long time, it cuts down on other parts of the meeting, but you must take the time that you feel is appropriate. Okay, Andrew Gilbert.
Yeah, President, thank you very much. There are 1,700 Jewish charities. I don't understand the criteria by which any of those 1,700 at this stage could be decided to come into the board or otherwise, and would like to refer back this application until we understand that criteria. As I understand it, what Lynn said is brilliant, and there's nothing issue about all that she's doing, but the charity was only formed less than a year ago. The accounts haven't been submitted to the charity commissioners yet.
Andrew, they have been submitted. They don't publish them for the first year. They have been submitted.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence. But the principle I'm trying to get at here is that I don't understand the criteria for which 1,700 organisations would be eligible to join the board, and I don't think that is in the interest of the board, and would like to see clear criteria by which deputies can understand why what organisations of that 1,700 should be accepted into the board.
I'm just going to reply that it's obviously been reviewed by the Constitution Committee, but I'm just going to ask Jeremy Sher very quickly if he will address us on that, because it had the concerns that you've got, Andrew, have of course been considered by the Constitution Committee that have made their recommendation. So could you, are you there, Jeremy?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. The criteria for admitting organisations is set out in clause 4 of the Constitution. It's part 5. If you have a look there, there are a series of criteria, and those can be waived in certain circumstances. Harif, like all other organisations that we recommend, we ask quite a lot of questions. A number of organisations that have come forward to the board, we've actually declined to recommend, and they've come back with more information. In fact, that happened to one organisation this week that I was looking at. So there is a process of scrutiny. We're not just recommending everyone, and there is a criteria, and some of these issues are going to be clarified, I think, in the new constitution in any event. So deputies can be comfortable that there is a process in place.
Thank you. I'm sure Andrew Gilbert is very comfortable. I'm just looking down because there were some more people that wanted to speak, and all the virtual hands are gone. I can't believe that they're all gone. Right, here we go. Jonathan Neumann, would you please unmute?
Yep, hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, of course. Yep, thank you.
Thanks very much, Marie. Jonathan Newman, Shomrey Adaf. Thank you, Lynn, for your terrific presentation. I think our community has real problems with Mizrahi representation. You know, having Edwin Shuker as a VP, I think, was an incredibly important beginning of a remedy to that. And Harif, which would be an excellent, I think, addition to the board in any event, is also really essential in my view to raising the profile of our Mizrahi and also Sephardi communities. So for my part, you know, I wholeheartedly support Harif's work. I'm delighted to see that there's a joint event between Harif and the board later this month. I'm sure deputies will join me in backing Harif's membership of the board today. Thank you.
Thank you. Ephraim Borowski, would you like to unmute? And I don't know if you, that wasn't really a question, it was a statement. Ephraim.
Yeah, thanks, Marie. I simply want to support this. As Lynn has already said, Harif has gone out of its way to undertake outreach work throughout the entire country, including that other bit of a country north of Carlisle. It does a remarkable job. I have some sympathy for what Andrew says, but now is not the time to draw down the shutters. We had other applications at the previous meeting. We have had applications in reasonably large numbers. We want to encourage people to join, organizations to join the board, because as I've said on many occasions, the community is no longer structured around shuls. So this is an important move. And if we're going to look at the criteria again, by all means, but let's not do it in the middle of the process. Harif are applied under the rules as they currently are, and we should welcome that and welcome them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gillian Moonman.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, and thank you, Lynn, for the presentation. I come from an Ashkenazi background, but since the lockdown lectures began, I've attended virtually every one, and I find them absolutely fascinating, learning for the pure pleasure of learning and covering a broad spectrum of all activities. And I feel that the admission of Harif to the board will enhance the profile of the board by including more strands of the Judaic family and allowing the descendants of those of Mizrahi and Sephardi families to be a part of this great organization. And I wholeheartedly support the admission.
Thank you. And thank you for being so brief, because it enables me to try and get more people. Paul Edlin.
I'd just like to endorse what everybody else has said. I think this organization has done superb work in the community. I know they help the Mizrahi and Sephardic communities, but they have certainly done great work in promoting the plight of Jews in Arab lands. And they've actually, as Ephraim said earlier, they've been up to Scotland and promoted and put on presentations there and throughout the country. And I think it would be very wrong not to allow this organisation to join the board when others, I believe other similar organisations have joined the board, maybe not quite the same, but certainly not synagogal organisations been allowed to join. And I hope that we will embrace this organisation within the board.
Thank you. And can I just remind deputies to, when they give their name, to state their constituencies, please. Mary Rainier Lee. I'm going to have to draw to a conclusion on the questions very shortly. I'm trying to be balanced.
Thank you. I also want to endorse what has already been said. I think Harif is a terrific organisation, and certainly I came to know about the Jews of the Middle East as a result of what Harif has been demonstrating all around the country. I think to consider criteria at this stage in the middle of an application is a ridiculous suggestion. And if Andrew wants to deal with criteria, he can do so as part of the constitutional revisions. I would welcome Harif, and I support it, and I hope everybody else will as well. Thank you.
Dori Schmetterling, please.
Thank you. Trying to get this unmute going was difficult. Anyway, let me just say in a few sentences, of course I'm going to support Harif. It's done brilliant work, as other people have said. And I'd also like to mention what hasn't been mentioned is they're internationally active and have done a lot to highlight, to raise the profile of Mizrahi refugees in the 40s and so on. And has highlighted the fact that life for Jews in Arab countries has not been all easy. So it's very important that they join this board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry, it's going to have to be the last question. Michael Reich, please.
Okay. I also would like to commend Harif. They came to our synagogue at Mosaic Reform, which was Middlesex New, about 8 or 9 years ago. Michelle Huberman also does a tremendous job of explaining the situation. And I think it's very, very important we get this picture of where particularly Jews have had to flee from countries in the Middle East, particularly since the late 60s and 70s, and that we have a much greater awareness. They've done a fantastic job in lockdown. I've been to see a number of their Zooms, and I very much recommend they'll be a very, very good part of the Board of Deputies.
Right, I've had one comment back in the chat saying no one has asked Harif any questions. Deputies have had plenty of opportunities to ask questions. So the last person I'm going to ask to speak, if they want to ask any questions, Gary Mond.
I will ask a question. I wonder if Lynn could tell us a little bit about Harif's plans for the next year or so.
Right. Well, a lot of it obviously depends on the COVID situation. I would very much like to continue our Zoom activity. It's been an absolute revelation how many people have come to our events and continue to come to our events. And as Dori said, we have an international following now. And it's been very exciting. One of the more positive aspects, I think, of this whole crisis. So I think what I would like to do is really expand our reach, improve our relations with every aspect of the community here and abroad.
And then put that on in.
Yeah. Do a lot in schools as well. I hope we will be able to do more in schools.
There's been plenty of time for questions, and we are a democratic organisation, so I think it's time for everybody to vote. Okay, I've just mentioned to Edwin, who just asked me to say this message. He was going to ask a question. That's not indicative of his support either way, but I think we've had a lot of questions and a lot of time for deputies to give their feedback. So could I please ask for the vote to be launched, please? Should come up. I'm sorry, Brian, we are proceeding to the vote. I can see Brian's virtual hand, but I can't ask any more questions because we have to move on with the agenda. And also, Efrat, so far, I'm sorry as well. Is the vote coming? Here we go. I'm just waiting for the outcome of the vote. Thank you. Right, I've been given the vote. Congratulations, Harif. You have had 90% of the vote and 10% against. So well done. We look forward to seeing the deputy for Harif next time. Thank you. Thank you very much. Going on, please, to the next organisation waiting to join the board, J Living. Can I please ask Jane Goodman, welcome, the Chief Executive, to give an introduction. I'm just going to ask for the clock to be put up, please, for 3 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions and the vote. So welcome, Jane.
Thank you.
Can we just wait for the clock to go up so we're aware of the timings? Thank you very much. So if you'd like to just start when I'll just be one, hopefully not too long. I'm told the clock can't go on yet, so apologies. Would you like to get going, and we'll put the clock on when there's 2 minutes to go. Thank you.
That's all right. I will start. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me this morning. It's a pleasure to see all of you, although it's virtual, as every meeting seems to be these days. I'm Jane Goodman, Chief Executive of J Living, otherwise known as Jewish Community Housing Association, formerly known as B'nai B'rith JBG, which is what some members may recall that we were called originally. We are a registered provider of social housing, and we mainly provide sheltered accommodation to older and more vulnerable members of our community. We've been in existence for 54 years. And I think there are still quite a lot of people that don't know about us. And I'm finding that in my first year as chief exec, as I get more approaches from people to find out more about what we do. We operate as far north as Hemel Hempstead, and we have a very small scheme down in Margate. Most of our accommodation is around the London Borough of Barnet, though. Our primary aim is to keep people in their own homes and independent for as long as possible. So they may have extra services coming in, but we provide a daily service to check that tenants are well, secure, and that has been never more important than over the past 9 months with the awful COVID situation. We're an ambitious organisation. We're small, but we do aim to punch above our weight. And we feel that at the moment, more than ever, housing is top of the agenda, particularly amongst our community. We're aware of gaps. There are groups of our community that are not being catered for, not being accommodated. They can't access social housing. And that's very much our drive for the future, is to open up our offer of accommodation to other people. We're very proud of the partnerships that we have with Kisharon, Norwood. We've worked previously with Jewish Women's Aid. We have a long-standing, very positive relationship with Jewish Care. And we're constantly open and welcome to new partners. So I think that's us in a very tight nutshell.
Thank you. And I'd also like to thank you for coming in within time. Thank you very much. It's lovely to have your application. I think we've got a couple of questions, and thank you for offering to take the questions. David Benson, would you like to ask your question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Central Birmingham, thank you very much for the presentation. I believe you said you come as far north as Hemel Hempstead.
Yes.
You know there were Jews a bit further north than that, and have you ever considered coming a bit further north, such as Birmingham, Leeds? Or is that...
We have a good working relationship with Leeds Jewish Housing Association.
Okay.
And we currently lead on the national network of Jewish housing associations across the UK. And I believe we have invited Birmingham to join us, and they have attended our meetings before.
Right.
So we are open to all possibilities, but we have good working relationships with our colleagues all over the UK as a result of the network.
Excellent. Thank you, and thank you for all the work you do. It's a wonderful thing that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Ruth Hart, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yes. Good morning.
Morning.
I'd like to ask the same as David just asked, but will you come westwards to Bournemouth?
I'd love to come to Bournemouth. That's where I'm from originally. We have had discussions in the past with Pat Kravitz from Bournemouth. That was a few years ago, about possibly doing a joint venture down there. I believe personally there's a huge need for specific sheltered accommodation in that area. So I think it'd be fair to say we'd welcome any opportunity to explore that.
Thank you. Shelley Salter, please give your name and constituency, just a reminder. Are you there, Shelley?
Unmute. Oh, hello. My name is Shelley Salter. I'm from the LJS. Now, your predecessor came and spoke at Lamud and explained who you are and what you do, but that was a couple of years ago, so you must have moved on from there. But can you tell us who your recipients are? I think she said at the time that it was mainly the older community, but she wanted to look at new aspects of people that needed new housing, i.e. entry-level young adults was a big one. And also, where does your money come from? And what do you own these buildings or what? How does it work?
No, to go backwards, we own our buildings. The majority of them we own outright. They were purchased many years ago. We have a couple of buildings where we have long lease arrangements on them from the freeholder. Our income comes purely from rents and service charges. We're very fortunate that occasionally we will receive a legacy or a donation, but the majority of our income is purely rents and service charges. We do cater for some young people at the moment, so we provide the only kosher student accommodation in London, which I should have mentioned previously, and we currently accommodate 28 young people in that property. Amongst our general stock of sheltered accommodation, we do have younger people who may have physical disabilities or learning disabilities or mental health issues. But I think part of our long-term plan is we're very aware that there is a huge part of our community who cannot get onto the housing ladder. And I think that's where our objectives lay in the future, is how we can serve that need moving forward.
Thank you. Brian Gedalia.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good. Yeah, just a quick question for the applicant. Assuming that the board admits this association to membership, who exactly will be represented by it? Will it be the residents of the houses that they own, or who? Because I'm not actually clear how this organisation represents British Jews in the context of the board.
Thank you for your question.
We have a large group of tenants. Although we're a small organisation, we have a large group of tenants from varying Jewish backgrounds. We're not particularly aligned to one one, particular background. I think as an organisation, we want to have a voice on behalf of our tenants, on behalf of potential tenants, potential people across the community who are having difficulties with housing and accessing services. And we've started obviously that work by leading on the national network of Jewish housing associations and taking part in policy work in the wider context, looking at housing for the community. So whilst, yes, primarily it's to represent our tenants and our board members, I think moving forward, there's a wider voice that we want to represent.
Thank you. Now, I'm really apologise that we are running late and I can't take the increasing amount of questions. I'm going to, I can only have 2 more questions, and I'm going to give priority to people that don't normally speak. Rochelle Goldberg, followed by James Harris. Could you make your questions as briefly as possible, please? And I apologise to the others, and I will try and give you preference next time. Thank you
very much, President. Rochelle Goldberg, Kensington United School. How many people are you actually dealing with as a ballpark figure? Because you're saying you're dealing with the older community and also with people that have special needs. So we've got an indication.
Okay, currently we have about 500 tenants in total across all our properties. So we have some people that are in couples and single people as well.
Thank you. Thank you. James Harris, President of UJS.
Thank you, Marie. Jane, I appreciate what you said about the student accommodation and the provision that you have for student accommodation. I'm just wondering, well, I guess I have 2 very quick questions out of curiosity. Would you be able to say the uptake, on your student accommodation? Is it popular? Is it not? Is it declining?
We are vastly oversubscribed, hugely oversubscribed.
Sure. And then I guess my second question is more to you, Marie. I guess what does the board do for on the social housing issue and I guess on the issues that J Living really work on?
Are you getting towards whether or not they're entitled to apply to the Board of Deputies, because that's the same criteria that's being put before, and that's gone through the Constitution Committee. And just because it's a different type of organisation that we're having apply, I think deputies should be very open-minded to this, and they're very, very representative. I am going to take one more question because I think it's from someone that's got a lot of experience in this sort of field, who I think could perhaps be helpful to this question. Could Leon Smith please ask your question?
Yeah, thank you, Marie. I have to declare an interest because I'm actually a director of J Living. I think there are several reasons why the board should endorse this application. First of all, the Housing Association does a tremendous job of providing care for those in need within the community. Well, not care, but housing. And unfortunately, Jane forgot to mention one of our schemes, which of all places is in South London, i.e. south of the river. Not only does it play an important part in the community, but the one thing which I think accepting J Living's membership will do will be not only to raise the profile of J Living, but also to raise the profile of the whole issue of housing within the board. I've been a member of the board for many years. I don't speak very much, but I do listen a lot. And I cannot recall very many discussions on this incredibly important subject. Housing is going to become more and more of an issue. We're not only about old people, as you've heard, we're about younger people as well. And we've got all sorts of plans and ideas for the future. So I very, very much hope that deputies will vote yes. I appreciate this isn't a question, but it's a very strong endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leon, for speaking so eloquently. Right, I'm going to ask the observers to be put in the nicest possible way into the waiting room. because we're going to have the vote. And I think deputies, you will see as time goes forward that we are having an increasing number of communal organisations and wanting to join the board. We've already got some 42 communal organisations, and I think that that's a very good thing, because we are the democratic representative voice of the community, and diversity and representation from across the entire Jewish spectrum, I personally think is to be applauded. I'm just waiting to hear now whether or not we are ready for the vote, which will come up onto the screen. In the meantime, I'm going to do a new deputy. Oh, let's do the vote first. And I think it is nerve-wracking when people come to talk about their organisations. They're not used to the advocacy on the first time of the board. So I do want to congratulate whatever the result is of the speakers giving their presentations. So I'm just going to do some new deputy welcomes whilst I'm waiting to hear for the vote. Welcome to Adam Rose, Masorti Judaism, Dan Smith, Liberal Judaism, Gideon Schwartz, B'nai Akiva, David Pine, Bridge Lane Beth Hamidrash, Jeremy Fraser, Ealing Liberal Synagogue, Imi Wise, Under 35 Observer for the Federation of Zionist Youth, Noah Besbrode, Federation of Zionist Youth, Harrison Engler, Habanim Draw UK, Sarah Cash, Jewish Lads and Girls Brigade, Nigel Tobias, South Manchester Synagogue, Paul Hart, Mosaic Liberal Synagogue, David Lee Ellis, Under 35 Observer, Mosaic Reform, Talia Khain, Sadeh Farm, David Parlons, Sandys Road Synagogue, and Natasha Hausdorff, UK Lawyers for Israel. So we can see just how many people are joining the board. So we have a vote. Just to let you know, 178 people voted, 84 have said yes, and 16 apparently have said no, and that doesn't add up. So we'll have to be patient because I'm just going to wait for the confirmation to come to me with the percentages. I think it has made it, but I can see the maths isn't quite right. So if you give me a minute. Oh, here we go. It's come out now. 84.16. So congratulations to Jay Living. Welcome to the Board of Deputies, and we look forward to seeing your deputy and understanding your work. So thank you. I'm very pleased that both organisations have been admitted. Thank you very much. Right, coming on, please. We now have Brian Bloom is going to give a short presentation from Ajax from Remembrance Sunday. It was very difficult that we were not all able to march. We know it's been a very important part of the board's remembrance. So Brian, would you like to say a few words? Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Brian Bloom, Ajax, an update. Before I go ahead though, may I congratulate the board on our anniversary. And I might mention in passing that our first president was in actual fact a serving member of the British militia, so a military man. Anyway, onwards. Madam President, fellow deputies, what an extraordinary year. However, Ajax has adapted and risen to the challenges, as we have always done since 1928. And the mission statement remains as important now as it was then: welfare, remembrance, education, and the fight against anti-Semitism. And at this point, I'll mention that we have been involved with the board since the late 20s in the fight against anti-Semitism. We are aware that Ajax is perceived as an elderly organization, and is thought that when our elder veterans pass on, the association will no longer exist. This is far from the truth. Ajax continues, and membership is now just under 1,700 in 25 branches across the country. Additionally, we have been joined by the Jewish members serving in the regular forces and the reserve forces of the Royal Navy, Army and Royal Air Force, and the University Squadrons and the Cadet Forces. This group are the Armed Forces Jewish Community, whose chair is a 37-year-old serving Lieutenant Colonel, supported by a full-time serving rabbi appointed by the Chief Rabbi's Office, and assisting him are part-time rabbis from the Sephardi, Federation, Masorti, and the Progressive movements. In their own right, the Armed Forces Jewish Community have a deputy and observers on the board, and the members are all associate members of AJEX. We are immensely proud of them. Next June, at our AGM, we hope to elect our next AJEX national chairman, a 44-year-old serving reserve soldier, a member of the Armed Forces Jewish Community and of AJEX. It is expected to be a democratic election with a carefully monitored count of the votes followed by a cordial handover. You know what I refer to. As a registered charity, and like the board, we've had to change our constitution and our work practices. We've also taken the opportunity to change our name to be more relevant and embracing of our times and the diversity of our community. We are no longer the Association of Jewish Ex-Servicemen and Women. Henceforth, we are AJEX, the Jewish Military Association UK, and we refer to ourselves as AJEX JMA. As the years go by, it is inevitable that the association will become smaller as we lose our older veterans. However, we have had Jews serving the Crown for over 250 years, and for as long as we have the Armed Forces Jewish Community, there will be a need for AJEX. Welfare continues to those in need from the serving and ex-serving and their dependents. It is not just the old, but also regrettably the young who suffer physical injury and mental combat stress. And currently we are spending up to £75,000 a year on welfare to them and their dependents. Every year, the Board of Deputies and the community join us at the Cenotaph for the AJEX annual parade. This year was our 86th. Last year, 2,000 marched with us. This year, because of COVID, it was not possible. Nonetheless, we were determined to commemorate the occasion. We asked the authorities, Westminster Council and the police, if we could film a service in October that we could then broadcast on the day. We are always astonished by the support and respect we receive from the wider community. They agreed we could have 20 participants and they would close Whitehall and provide us with police protection. And to cap that, they allowed us 10 participants to do the same last Sunday. We are pleased to report that this year, over 10,000 viewed our Facebook and YouTube service. Truly amazing. May we take this opportunity to thank you to our AJEX members, the branches, the Armed Forces Jewish Community, the Community Security Trust, the Jewish Lads and Girls Brigade, and Mitzvah Day. And Madam President, a very special thank you to you and the deputies and staff of the Board of Deputies for your continued support. There are not enough words to express our appreciation for all that you do.
Oh, thank you, Brian. Well, I was very proud to be one of those 20 people at the Cenotaph, and I'm also proud that I've supported and worked since I was 13, and remembrance is one of the most important things that we can do. And thank you for that heartfelt talk. Thank you. Thank you for all that you do, and good luck in the future. Right, can we go on to the President's statement, because we are running in tradition quite late now. Can I just give some, before we do that, I just would like Judy Silkoff to put up the votes on screen so that deputies are confident how the votes were broken down. So Judy, could you please put up the votes, please, for the organisations one after another? Okay, this is the poll result that's gone up for J Living. First, you can see 150 said yes, 29 said no, so 84% said yes and 16% said no. And Harif, you can see 159 said yes and 18 said no, so yes was 90% and 10% said no. Thank you very much for that. You can stop sharing. Thank you. Right, we're coming on to the President's statement. I want to give some muzzle toffs, and then I think we'll go straight on to deputies either speaking or asking questions, because we are short of time and I anticipate people will want to speak, and obviously the clock will be going up as usual. But first, muzzle toffs to Picure Director Jeffrey Leader on his MBA, David Parlons, well done on your BEM medal, Flora Frank on the birth of her new great-granddaughter, Sandra Teacher on the birth of her new grandson, and David Mendoza Wolfson, a Mazel Tov, Deputy for Reform Judaism, on his engagement to Melissa. And I have to say, that's the good news. Condolences, I'm afraid, to the family of former Deputy Eric Lenz, who unfortunately passed away earlier this week. And I'm sure that many deputies will remember Eric, and that is very, very sad news. And of course, the tragic news about Lord Sachs, and you will have seen the communal tributes that were paid to Lord Sachs, and also from myself. He was a giant of the Jewish community and wider society. His loss is absolutely going to affect all of us. And sorry, I have one more Mazel Tov to Anthony Adler on the birth of his son. Fantastic news there. Right, can I go straight on to questions, because they're already clocking up and I want to have sufficient time. Louise Ellman, would you like to speak, please?
Yes, and thank you. Louise Ellman, Jewish Labour Movement. The Equalities and Human Rights Commission report was an absolute indictment of the Labour Party. The Labour Party were found to have acted against equality laws and to have subjected Jewish members of the Labour Party to indirect discrimination and harassment. And it further found that there was a culture within the Labour Party which at best did not do enough to prevent anti-Semitism, and at worst could be seen to accept it. I can't think of anything worse that could be found. What we're now seeing is a fight back from the Corbyn supporters against Keir Starmer's wish to do something about this. Could Marie say more about how the Board of Deputies are going to continue to exert pressure on the Labour Party to make sure that not just the complaint system in the Labour Party is changed, but that the whole culture of left anti-Semitism is addressed? Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank Louise for all she has done. And I'm sure deputies will have seen, I've been not only on Question Time, the Today programme, also BBC News, ITV, Newsnight, as has Louise. We've all said that the EHRC report was an absolutely damning indictment of the Labour Party, who have been found guilty of unlawful acts of discrimination and victimisation. It doesn't get any worse than that. That is an absolutely shameful day for Labour. And of course, we've had other events during the week, which have led now to Keir Starmer withholding the whip from Jeremy Corbyn. And as I said on one of my interviews, what we do next and how we monitor the situation, we know that actions speak louder than words. It's not going to be a matter for trust. We are actively going to be following up on this at every step of the way. Could I give deputies, because I have spoken on national media all week, I hope deputies have heard this, an opportunity to want to say something. I'm going to give priority to people that had raised their hands before and hadn't been able to speak. Vicky Harris, please.
Vicky Harris, Hampstead Garden Suburb Synagogue. I'm not speaking on the particular point that Louise has spoken so
Can you speak up if you can?
I'm not speaking on the particular point Louise has spoken so eloquently about, but I have another important point that I wish to ask and raise. May I commend you, Madam President, for bringing the proposals for a new constitution to a special meeting scheduled for the 20th of December, and for the requirement to plough through tens of pages of legalese, which may perhaps help those of us who are insomniacs. Given that the key statement from the board solicitors in the executive summary is that, and I quote, the Board of Deputies is in essence a members organisation with deputies at the heart of everything it does. Will you confirm, firstly, that the documents are not confidential as marked, and that we deputies are encouraged to share them with the organisations whom we represent and to seek their views about the proposed constitutional changes? And also to ask you that whether, given that the current constitution requires a 2/3 majority to be amended, will you confirm that the honorary officers will not implement a new constitution unless the indicative vote by deputies yields at least a 2/3 majority? Thank you, Madam President.
Well, Vicky, you're lucky enough to be a member of the Constitution Working Group, so you've actually been right at the front of the campaign of putting forward these proposals, and I'd like to thank you and everybody on the Constitution Working Group. I have said that Colin Grazin in the letter to you is going to be the person who's going to answer your queries. As you know, at present, only the trustees are members of the board, and we are going to have an enlarged trust board. The papers are marked confidential, but of course, you should be sharing, you can share papers with your constituencies because you represent your constituencies. But I would ask you that you make sure that they go to duly authorised people. In relation to questions, as has been said in the letter, and as you were part of the Constitution Working Group, Vicky, Colin Grazin is going to deal with the questions and the answers. And the trustees are looking for an indicative vote. We've already had an overwhelming indicative vote in relation to the constitutional issues, and the letter that's gone to deputies has made it very, very clear that if there are amendments or anything they want to discuss, the timescale for writing. I think I can see Colin on the call. Could I just ask you, Colin, just to confirm your availability and if there's anything that you want to add at this stage?
I'm very happy to answer questions. I've already had a few coming through Judy Silkoff. If people want to email her, she sends them to me daily. I will respond the same day, hopefully, as I get them. And so far, the answers that I have given have, I think, been acceptable to the questioners, and I hope to go on in that way. But feel free, deputies, to ask anything you want to about the new proposed arrangements.
Thank you. Hannah Mesham, please. And can you say your constituency? Thank you.
Hannah Mesham, representing JNF UK.
Thank you, and welcome. I think it's your first meeting.
It's not my first meeting, but it's my first time speaking at the board. I'm very concerned about Labour Party anti-Semitism. I have to admit that I'm not a Labour Party supporter, but I am well aware that one day in the future, we might have a Labour government. It is essential to me that the government, even though I might not like its policies, is not anti-Semitic, and that the Jewish community, of which I am a proud member, can in those circumstances still flourish and continue without the fear of Jew hatred. Hence, Labour Party anti-Semitism really matters, not just to Labour supporters, but to all of us. I must congratulate the board on the 10 pledges that it published some months ago. They seem to me to be a tool from which we can hold Keir Starmer's feet to the fire. Yet I worry that the Labour Party is not sincere in its acceptance of these 10 pledges. I want to know what the board is doing and will do in the future to try to ensure adherence. For example, Pledge number 4 seeks to stop readmittance of prominent offenders. How do we reconcile this week's news that Jeremy Corbyn has been readmitted to the party with that pledge? Pledge number 5 talks about there being no platform for bigotry. Yet even in the very recent past, there have been disgraceful comments from Labour Party members. And pledge number 10 asks for Labour to show leadership and take responsibility. Are we really confident that Keir Starmer is doing that? So, Madam President, I am worried and hope you and the board can allay my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Hannah. We now know that the next stage is for an action plan to be produced by the Labour Party, which they said they accepted the EHRC report, but we need to be very clear they've got no choice. It's down to a statutory requirement because it's a statutory report. Thank you for your feedback on the 10 pledges, because the 10 pledges are a very important tool where we can hold the leader of the Labour Party who signed up to our 10 pledges directly to account. And that actually, the example of that in practice happened this week when Jeremy Corbyn was readmitted to the Labour Party. You will have seen the huge objection that we had and loudly we made it clear that Keir Starmer should not restore the whip to Jeremy Corbyn. I did a lot of media and TV work on that. Our voices were heard, also JLM, and in particular, you have to give credit to Margaret, who also made these representations very, very clear. And from that, the whip has now been withheld. Now, this is an ongoing situation. It's not going to be down to trust, as I've said. And Keir Starmer has said that he wants to be judged on his actions. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We are going to be following it up. We're waiting to see what the independent process is, and we're waiting for the action plan. But yes, we have the 10 pledges, and we will be following up directly on Keir Starmer as leader. So I don't want anybody here to think that we are complacent, but I do also want to say it was a very difficult week, and it was courageous of Keir Starmer to take the decision to withhold the whip, but we're still not letting anything go to Truss. And the Labour Party it was a very, very damning indictment of Labour, and Jeremy Corbyn has been nothing but shameless and remorseless for what he has put the Jewish community through. And clearly Labour's disciplinary process is unfit for purpose. But Keir Starmer did in the week take the appropriate leadership decision not to restore the whip, and we need to keep advocating for the community to make sure zero tolerance means just that, and there's no place for anti-Semites or their apologists in the Labour Party. So you will find us very, very firm in this. We will be unwavering. But thank you for your question. It's very appreciated. And thank you for your first speech. Thank you very much. Can we now go on, please, to Mervyn Smith? And I don't want to cut people short. I've got a lot of questions, but I'm also conscious that we've got all the reports to get through as well. Mervyn.
I just wonder if people have followed David Collier's blog, which is a lifetime's work that he carries out relating to anti-Semitism and matters relating to Israel. In this respect, the voices, which may well be from some members of the Labour Party, condemning in the worst possible language the death of Rabbi Sachs, using language which is quite hateful and deserves to be actioned. I've written to Keir Starmer with a copy of various persons, some of whom are definitely linked to Momentum and to other aspects of the Labour Party. And I wonder if you follow this in any way and what action you, on behalf of the board, would be taking to the hate words that have been presented.
Well, thank you for that. Can I say that David Collier and the grassroots activists have played a huge part in fighting the anti-Semitism coming from the Labour Party. It's been a huge communal effort, all the communal organisations, and he certainly has really worked very hard. So I want to commend him. I am really disturbed at the amount of hatred online, and I'm afraid if you look at the Board of Deputies Twitter feed as well, we're not immune from that as well. It is something of great concern, and we continue to fight for online harms. We continue to make sure that we advocate for the social media giants. We've had meetings with all of them in the last few months to make sure that they adopt the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. But online is the new front line in the fight for anti-Semitism. You're quite right to have this as one of your huge concerns, and we share it, and that is one of our major priorities. But thank you for your question. I'm going to take a few questions at once, because otherwise I haven't got an opportunity to get through any of the questions because there are so many. So can I take Robert Stone, followed by David Lee Ellis, followed by Paul Hart.
Thank you, President. Robert Stone, Finisher Reform Synagogue. One of the effective ways of fighting anti-Semitism, of course, is Holocaust education. And I'd like to pick up Marilyn Travato's question to you about ensuring that people understand that the final solution was the Jews only, while still acknowledging the issue of Roma and disabled people and so on. My wife Helen was a founder and is co-chair of Generation to Generation, which was founded 2 or 3 years ago, because the number of survivors that are available to talk is reducing. And so this has taken second generation speakers. My wife's mother was a refugee from Germany, and I'm delighted to say some young third generation speakers who speak to schools on Holocaust Memorial Day and at other times. And we now have 40 speakers that we send to school to talk about the experience with very professionally made PowerPoints of their parents or grandparents. I just wanted to say, in response to Marilyn Travato, to reassure her that they work in close cooperation with the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. And although, of course, by definition, the talks are focused on the anti-Semitism and the experience of Kristallnacht and Jewish themes, they bring in Roma and others and issues of refugees, and we get feedback forms from the school children. These are around 14 to 16-year-olds. The feedback we get from them, particularly from people like the children of refugees or Asian Muslim children, the feedback we get from them is that this has triggered something in them. So we do refer to other persecutions, they, Generation to Generation, but it's made clear what the final solution was about. But I think linking them is an important element in the fight against anti-Semitism. And by the way, a little plug, Madam President, if anybody's interested in Generation to Generation, if you are second generation or your children are interested, please contact me and I'll put you in touch with them. Plug over. Thank you.
Thank you. David Lee Ellis.
Thank you.
Under 35 observer. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm an under 35 observer from Mosaic Reform. Just joined this week. I want to thank you for welcoming me in. Maria, I also want to thank you for speaking on the radio on I think it was Tuesday morning when you were on the Today program. I listened to it on my way to work. And also just Daniel from speaking earlier, because he actually loosely set up what I wanted to speak about this morning, which was essentially how we have to be very, very conscious of the use of language, especially when it relates to anti-Semitism. There was a letter sent to the Telegraph on the 11th of November by the apparently seriously named Common Sense group of MPs, Conservative MPs, in which they refer to, and you can look up this this letter, it's very easy to find, just Google it, when they referred to cultural Marxism in an attack on the National Trust, accusing the National Trust of an attempt of rewriting history because they actually wish to have open discussion regarding British history. I'm a teacher, so I'm very interested in using or getting to the actual truth as opposed to getting to what we feel the truth should be. The board censured Suella Braverman last year, I believe in March, for use of exactly the same phrase, that phrase cultural Marxism. and yet there seems to have been silence regarding this issue, which I find a little bit surprising. I think it's really important to recognise that while we hold the opposition to account for anti-Semitism within their ranks, that we actually draw attention to factions within the government who are using anti-Semitic language. Presumably, in a way, I would imagine that they would deny any knowledge of the term's anti-Semitic connotations. However, frankly, there are 28 of them that have signed their names under this letter, and I find it quite bizarre. I actually wrote to Oliver Dowden, who's my MP, about this. I believe it was possibly the Friday before last about this. He replied uncharacteristically promptly, actually, because he normally doesn't reply for quite a while, which showed that he did take this seriously. However, he did in his reply to me assure me that these MPs were not anti-Semitic, which I took issue with, because I feel that it's very much not on the position of a non-Jew to tell me what constitutes anti-Semitism. If you have 28 MPs using a phrase that is a textbook example of dog whistle politics, I think that should be challenged by the board. So I was just essentially wondering if there will be a response to this. Oh, and just to mention, I did actually write back to Mr. Dowden and say to him what I've just said to you, that I don't feel that it's appropriate for him to tell me what constitutes anti-Semitism, and that I don't actually believe that there would be a legitimate excuse.
Thank you. You're on red, but thank you. I'll take the next question. Thank you. Paul Hart.
Paul Hart, Mosaic Liberal. This is my first meeting, first chance.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Does the board also realise that anti-Semitism goes also through the trade unions, such as Unite, and things that Mr. McCluskey has been saying?
Thank you. That's your question. Thank you very much for the clarity of your question. Robert, on Holocaust education, absolutely understand where you're coming from, and it is essential that we continue to work really, really hard. I want to pay tribute to the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, to HET in particular, and I also gave evidence at the Holocaust Memorial inquiry, but there's nothing more important than Holocaust education, and we've got a big responsibility to play there. In relation to David's question about cultural Marxism and the 28 conservative parliamentarians who used that phrase, the term cultural Marxism may have a legitimate use, but it's frequently now being co-opted, in my view, by the far right, including violent extremists like the Powys synagogue murderer, John Ernest, and it can often be used as dog whistle anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. And I agree about language, and we urge care and precision in its deployment, and for people to be on their guard when reviewing materials, particularly online where this is cited. And from the context of this letter, the MPs and peers' concern about the National Trust and other museums more overtly referencing the history of the slave trade, it didn't seem likely that the 28 conservative parliamentarians were actually alleging an anti-Semitic conspiracy. But that being said, I disagree with their letter, and part of tackling racism today is a critical analysis of the behaviours and attitudes of the past, I think, including looking at how individual societies profited from the sufferings of others, particularly relating to historic evils like the Holocaust, or indeed the transatlantic slave trade. So I want to thank you for that question. And Paul, yes, of course, we are very concerned about the trade unions. And if you review some of the board statements, there have been huge concern expressed at many of the comments that one Mr. Len McCluskey has made. And I absolutely agree that that is also a fundamental part of our work. And anti-Semitism and racism, wherever it falls, has got to be tackled. But that is an absolute area. Can I just take 3 more questions together, and then I'm sorry, I'm going to have to move on. David Parlons, Andrew Gilbert, and David Safir, and I'm really sorry that I can't get to everybody, so I have to apologise. Right, David, welcome again.
Can you hear me, Mary?
Yes, we can hear you.
Brilliant. First of all, thank you so much for acknowledging my award for British Empire Medal. It'll be a quick call, I can assure you. And I thought it was a wonderful idea that you had to celebrate the 260th anniversary, mentioning and having an interview with Henry Grunwald, Vivian Wyman and Jonathan Arkash. I thought that was absolutely wonderful. And well done on your Abraham Society, which you gave a couple of days ago. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you so much. Look forward to joining you in the future.
That's very kind, and welcome again. I think I said David Safir next. Hello, David.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Yes, good morning. And thank you very much for responding to the question from my fellow congregant, David Lee Ellis. I'd just like to follow up on that. When the, as you rightly say, when the Common Sense Group used this term cultural Marxism, it is really a dog whistle to those who question our loyalty to Britain, and obviously also to those who scream Jews will not replace us in Charlottesville. I'm very concerned because although I remember that David Lawrence of Hope Not Hate and Edie Friedman of the Jewish Council Racial Equality have rightly complained that sanitizing terms such as cultural Marxism can rehabilitate anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, I think we also need to be very much aware that in the wake of the Black Lives Matter debates, and of course in the context of the debate about citing the Holocaust Memorial, we as the community must be prepared in future to confront those who are minded to believe that every response to historical, not just to current, but to historical anti-Semitism, such as, for example, the campaign to remove the name of Simon de Montfort from the eponymous university in Leicester, is cultural Marxism trying to impose an alien, cosmopolitan, i.e. Jewish and certainly not Christian culture on this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to take, thank you for that. The last two questions, and we have to move on. Can I please ask those two to be brief, because I haven't got onto the divisional reports. So the next person was Andrew Gilbert, and then please Jerry Lewis.
President, thank you very much. Andrew Gilbert, Reform Judaism. Next weekend on Sunday, I'm asking the board to send out notice of the Jewish Labour Movement one-day conference where Keir Starmer and 20 other members of the Labour front bench will be speaking, and it will give opportunity for deputies and everyone else in the Jewish community to be in a format very similar to this in 55 different sessions next weekend, and will also include obviously Dame Louise Ellman, Margaret Hodge, Ruth Smith, and many others of our vital friends from the community, and we'll be talking about all these pieces that unfortunately in this meeting we cannot talk in detail. And I want to thank the board for again the 10 pledges and all the work that they have done, and also echo David Lee Ellis's point that it is necessary to focus on all parties, not just the Labour Party. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you. And I am so conscious how people want to speak, and I'm going to ask Gillian to organise a coffee morning, perhaps, that have been successful, perhaps a coffee morning with me where we can all talk informally and you can continue to ask questions, if that would help. Jerry Lewis.
Thank you, Madam President. A bouquet. Congratulations on your work dealing with the Labour Party. You played a binder, and I congratulate you and the board for the excellent publicity and the way you've conducted this issue. I'm not alone at this meeting. Many deputies are also concerned that the balance of this meeting, as many others, have been wrong. We have not had anywhere near sufficient time to debate. We've had lots of presentations, videos. I'm not complaining about the people who spoke, but just the principle, the balance is all wrong. We should have far more time for democratic discourse rather than just having presentations. Can I come on to my main points? They are, I don't know how many deputies have had the opportunity to wade through over 100 pages on the Constitution, or that are they aware of their losing £1 if things go belly up with the board? you ought to read the documentation. I want some assurances, please, that there's going to be sufficient time to go through all the paperwork and all the amendments which come forward. Are any proposed changes to the Constitution, which are not in the new rules, going to be also debated? If they're not, how can we change the new rules to make sure they fit the old Constitution? That hasn't been covered. Can we have some idea of how the committee will decide which amendments to accept and which ones to reject? If they are not accepted, can we be guaranteed times to debate them? And finally, I want to point out to all deputies, this is a very, very important change to the board. I agree with the principle of having a limit to those concerns of financial propriety with regards to what might happen if the board is sued. But everything else needs to be watched. We need not to have any changes to our board in terms of accountability and transparency. When we debated in a full hall, we always could hear applause or silence or whatever when we made our comments, even catcalls. With a silent board, as in Zoom, that no longer is possible. Please bear in mind that silence in these circumstances does not necessarily mean agreement. Thank you.
Well, of course, Jerry Lewis did play a huge part in the previous constitution, but deputies, I'm afraid the constitution is not fit for purpose. We are an unincorporated body, and it is a very good thing to be able to enlarge the trust board. Unfortunately, Jerry is one of those people that's been working or had worked very, very hard on the Constitution Working Group, and Jerry's had ample time to be involved in those discussions. I'm going to put Colin Grazing on again very quickly, because he is ready, willing and able to answer all of deputies' questions. He's independent. He's part of the Constitution Working Group and a previous employment law judge who's more than able to answer questions. And we're not going to be taking amendments on the day, because last triennium, 3 years were spent and the Constitution was not changed. It's a very big job. Having to get these documents ready, it is a very big thing, but there was no progress, and it really is very important to be an organisation fit for purpose, that we have a proper working constitution. And I really think that a few individuals shouldn't try to stop this change, which is necessary for the future of the board. Colin, could you just come back on again to reassure people that you are here ready to answer all of their questions? Can I just ask Colin to make another appearance?
Right, so this time with the video camera on, so I am. Colin Grazing, Leeds Jewish Representative Council. Most of you will not know who I am, and that's because I am totally apolitical. My interest in the board is almost entirely legal and neutral. And in that respect, that's why I think I've been asked to do this job. That's why I wanted to do it. The answer to Jerry's point that directly concerns me is the amendment issue. Some of this is political. The amendment issue is, I hope, apolitical. I don't know how many proposed amendments there will be. If there are amendments suggesting particular points, I will try to group them, and at the risk of mentioning the Labour Party, do what the Labour Party do, which is to put them into a composite amendment so they fairly reflect the view of a number of people. I want to use this opportunity to speak to say that I would like people to work with me. At the moment, the drafting committee consists of me, and I'm not a committee. If there are apolitical deputies who want to do this on a purely legal point of view, purely administrative, apolitical, and working out sensible drafting without expressing any views, can they contact Judy by email and give their names? And I hope hopefully a group of, I don't know, not more than 6, probably less than 6 is all you need, to go through the amendments, proposed amendments, decide which ones represent a majority view, and then put them forward as properly drafted amendments. After that, the process for deciding how they're going to be discussed will have to be a matter for discussion of itself as my drafting as the draft letter said, the letter that Marie sent out said, and we will hopefully have a process and everybody will agree on the day. But I'm very open to questions in writing, or it was suggesting we might have a Zoom meeting or a series of Q&A Zoom meetings. I'm very happy to do that and spend as much time as deputies want. But please, if you want to volunteer to help in the process that I've just outlined, please do so.
Thank you. Right, I appreciate this is a very, very difficult process, but as I want to just stress, last triennium, three years were spent and no progress was made. I'm just going to ask Robert Stone very quickly to make a few comments on how important it is that we can get to discuss this change in the Constitution and why we have to get it on the table and it shouldn't be obstructed. Robert, could you just address us?
Well, I think you've just said it, President. Robert Stone, Finnish Reform Centennial again. I declare an interest, as I've been working on this for 9 years now. And we have almost got to this point many times, and then we've fallen apart because not everybody agreed. Now, this constitution that's being put forward now has been worked on by a group which had included Jerry, but included a lot of other people and Colin for, 18 months now? And we have got to a position where it's going to be a compromise. Not everybody's going to be happy with everything in the document, but we have to, and there are lots of things in the document I don't like, but it's a good compromise. And the point about a compromise is, in a compromise there are always things that somebody doesn't like, and almost everything somebody will dislike. But we are as close as we can get now to a situation where the board can be representative and be responsive to its constituencies in a way that, to be honest, there have been times when it has not been particularly representative, and there are times when it's not been particularly responsive, as many deputies will know. This will enable us to be much more responsive and democratic, and I urge us to put forward our objections. But if our objections are overruled, we still have what's good enough. And as my wise man once told me, good enough is good enough. This is certainly good enough to ensure that we've got a much more democratic board than we've had in the past. So I dislike quite a lot of it, but it's a lot better than what we've got now.
Thank you. And the word compromise is something that's very important, because I've felt that from the board side there's been a huge amount of compromise as well. And I would urge all of you to take up the offer from Colin Grazin to go through the process of discussion. He's going to be leading on that. He's independent, he's apolitical. I regret that I can't spend any more time on the President's statement, because we're not going to have any time, which will be unfair for the divisional reports. So I would urge you to be as brief as is possible. We will have Amanda for Defence first, please, followed by Sheila International, Stuart MacDonald for Finance and Organisation, and Edwin Shooker for Community Education and Interfaith. Amanda.
Thanks, Marie. Firstly, I want to thank my division for all that they do as part of their roles representing their communities, and of course on their work on the Defence Division. Deputies, you see statements from the President and from me about the results of the public meetings we hold, and of course on our policy positions on defence-related issues. But much of our work goes on in private in support of deputies and their communities, and by working with a wide range of our stakeholders. That's taking place in responding to government consultations directly, or via our family law group, which is chaired by Eleanor Lind, or with our medical advisor, very important right now, who works with us, Professor David Katz. We also work closely with the Union of Jewish Students and James Harris, and with deputies to tackle anti-Semitism on campus. Today, I want to congratulate our deputy, Toby Conin, for his campaign at Warwick University that's resulted in their adopting ARA and defeating a BDS motion there. We've also been working with other deputies and with other people at universities, and we hope to see more news about ARA adoptions in the next week or so. Separately, you'll also be pleased to know that we've been having discussions at the highest levels of government in relation to changes in the coronavirus lockdown restrictions. We all now know that we'll know more about this in the next day or so, and a lot will depend on the infection rates. So I know you're join me in the message that Maria has been sending out, that it remains increasingly important that everyone observes our social distancing regulations. I commend our division report to you, and I'm happy to take your questions. I can see there's a question from Carol and Jonathan, and I'll take those two questions. Carol and Jonathan, and I'll take those two questions first. Carol, if you could unmute yourself.
Thank you, Amanda. Is it possible for deputies to get a list of those universities and other institutes of higher education that have now adopted the IHRA, so that those of us who might have connections can bring pressure on those that haven't yet adopted?
And Jonathan?
Hi, Amanda, thank you. First, I just want to say I did try to put this question to the President, but for the second meeting in a row, although some people in the meeting were able to speak twice, I was not called on to speak at all. Maybe we can potentially look at another way to run Zoom meetings in a more equitable manner. And it's very, I'm not blaming the President for anything, I just know that it's very difficult to do this when there's 200 people on the call. The question reverts to the debate around cultural Marxism. This debate's been going on for months, it's not going anywhere, and we don't seem to be getting anywhere towards solving it. So potentially, is there a role for the board in setting out when there are times that clearly cultural Marxism can be used in an anti-Semitic manner, and there are times when people are using the term cultural Marxism and it's clearly not anti-Semitic? Is there a way in which the board could potentially put out some guidance that would allow a benchmark to be set against which we can judge the use of the term, rather than having political arguments every time that someone says it?
Thank you. Thank you, Carol, and thank you, Jonathan. Carol, the Union of Jewish Students did some research with all universities about the status of their ARA adoption. I can certainly send that to you, but what I'm going to suggest is that we, in the next briefing for deputies, we include a link to that research. It gives details of all the universities that adopted it. It's a live document, so it gets updated, and that will have the information that you suggest. And Jonathan, I think Marie referred to a question on cultural Marxism earlier, but it sounds to me like you have some ideas for what the board could be doing. So perhaps we could take this offline and we can discuss how we can take this further. Thank you. I think that's it. Marie, I don't know if you want to
Jonathan, over. Yes, I'm very sorry that you weren't able to talk. I have to run the meeting, and I do try to get through as many people as possible. But I do know in relation to some of the issues today that they were very important, but I do give priority to people that haven't spoken. You will have priority next time. But of course, I knew that Amanda would have her Defence Division report, and I'm trying to get through as many people as possible. Thank you, Amanda. Sheila, would you present your report, please?
Thank you, Marie, and good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you. I hope you're all well. So you've had my report. I'm very happy to take any questions and comments, and to be succinct, as Marie has said. You know, in these times, it's been quite difficult because the engagement that we have had with foreign embassies and some of the meetings, we have not been able to do face-to-face, obviously, and the Zoom meetings we've continued with the Foreign Office, with the Minister for North Africa and the Middle East, and we have felt that the opportunities to engage, as I say, have been curtailed. So I'm pleased at this point to let you know there are a couple of events actually going on this week. On Wednesday at noon, the Lithuanian Embassy are actually having an event called Visas for Life. It's the story of Sugihara Kiuni, who actually, there's an author who is commemorating a book about this person who saved lives during World War II and the atrocities in Europe. And anyway, if if you wanted to get in touch with me, I have asked that details of this event should be circulated. The Lithuanian event, the embassy are always very hospitable to us, and as I say, they feel it deeply that they haven't been able to engage this year. And also on the 1st of December, we're quite excited to be working in cooperation with the Israeli Embassy and Harif, one of our new members, on an event which is called A Commemoration of the Plight of Jewish Refugees from Arab Countries, and that's between 7 and 8 o'clock on the 1st of December. So there are 2 events there. We will circulate the details. So thank you for everybody who's been involved with any meetings that we have had, and now I'm happy to take any comments or questions. Thank you. I think Shelley, you wanted to say something. Shelley Salter?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Right, sorry, Shelley Salter, the LGS. I'm a member of the International Committee. This isn't really directed at you, this is directed at the professional staff, but the members of this committee seem to be less and less included in any decisions, in any policy. We'd like to know the meetings of why they went to them, what they said. We know there's no outcomes, there's nothing.
Okay, Shelley, well, thank you. You, as you say, you're a member of the division and you were there last Thursday when we had our meeting, and you will be aware that Phil Rosenberg was there, who's a Director of Public Affairs and very supportive of the work we do. We spoke about our new strategy and the things we would like to do to work with the members of the division going forward, and part of the discussion included exactly the point you're making, and it was agreed that we would provide details of not exactly the content of meetings before they take place, but there would be more full debriefings afterwards. So thank you for making that point to everybody, but as you know, it was discussed at our meeting and we will make that provision. Okay, and thank you to Talia. I don't know if she's listening today. Talia, we're so appreciative of everything you do. Thank you. Anybody else? Robert Festenstein. Hi, Robert.
There we go. Hi, Sheila.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for the answer to Shelley just now. When you talk about distributing information, will that be to all of the deputies?
Okay, so obviously through the division, we will have to decide what we can, what we will disseminate and what not. People work very hard to get elected to be members of divisions, and it must be appropriate that at that level, that's where the information is disseminated. But obviously anything of national importance, such as the ministers' meeting, obviously we always let everybody know. And I'm always very happy, as would Talia be, to send any emails to me, anything you want to bring up personally, always open and very happy to engage.
But this is not about, though. This is a sort of a culture that if people want to know something, then all you have to do is email. If we are, I beg your pardon. I'm Robert Festenstein, Prestwich Hebrew Congregation.
Yeah.
If we are to report to our constituencies as to what the board is doing, shouldn't all of the deputies be involved as to what is going on in each of the divisions, provided the information is not secret?
Absolutely. And can I bring in another point? We will be engaging on something that's not been mentioned at this meeting. We're going to have a digital marketing campaign that I am heading up the leadership side, working with professional staff to run a whole campaign of getting our message out. And the sorts of things that you're talking about is exactly what we want every deputy to be able to take to their community who asks a person, you're the deputy, what does the board do? And this sort of information, as you say, a non-restrictive level, is exactly the sort of message that we will be working very hard on in the coming months. And this has happened because we have not been able to have a president's dinner, and we are taking the opportunity in a positive way to get our message out. And we've actually got a working group, the FNO, working with me and professional staff to exactly determine the level at which we let deputies feel confident to go to their communities about the work that we do. And it will include information that has come from important meetings. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Any more questions for Sheila? Thank you, Sheila. That's appreciated. Stuart, would you like to present the Finance and Organisation Division report, please?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Thanks, Marie, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to deliver the briefest of these reports for today because I was aware that various deputies have been asking about what our response is to the corona crisis. A very difficult time. I've tried, without going into excessive detail, to give some sense of the activity that we're engaged in response to it in the Treasurer's report. in the divisional report, so I'm not going to repeat all of that. I just want to highlight a very few things, and as always, open to questions. If they're at the level of detail, they may be best to be taken offline, and if I don't have the answers to hand, I'll come back to you offline. But okay, here it is, very to the point. Costs are under control. Income is up relative to our post-corona crisis budget reforecast, and we are year to date, we are ahead of our projections, and that's very much thanks to a combination of the board's professional staff, particularly Brian Markison and Judy Silcoff, and the people working with them on finance and community engagement, and also the numerous deputies who have contributed to this, and the level of broad deputy engagement and what we're doing has increased, which is great. On the other hand, we really are not out of the woods. It's going to be tough for us as much as anyone else in the voluntary sector, not just the Jewish voluntary sector, going forward, for a year or two. We just have to face that. So we really can't open the spigots, as it were. I would just encourage deputies, and more of you are doing this, to redouble your efforts to get the communal contribution, where you represent a shul, onto your shul bills, and also to take up your organization's full representation rights. And this is happening, and it's really encouraging that almost all organizations have got up to date with paying their rep fees. Collections have accelerated for the communal contribution. And we also have a dozen or more fresh applications from new organizations wishing to join the board. This is all very good. And just in terms of general publicity, please get your organization, if you haven't already done so, to circulate the community briefing that comes out every week to the organization's members. And if you have any material, a number of you do this already, that you've prepared for insertion in or circulation with, for example, your shul magazines, let the board staff know about it, because that may very well provide the template for what we need going forward. So we are not out of the woods. We mustn't be deceived by the fact that our usual tendency to be ahead of our own forecasts means everything is as rosy as the wallpaper behind Robert Festenstein. I love your wallpaper, Robert. But that's it. If you have any questions that really belong in a board meeting, by all means, bring them to me now. Otherwise, please come to me offline. Very happy to help. There's a divisional meeting happening next week. People are welcome to come as observers, and they do get to speak and contribute. That's it.
I think you've got a couple of questions there.
I can't see who they are.
Sid Braham and Brian Mark.
Sorry, who?
Sid Braham and Brian Mark.
Why don't we start with Brian and then Sid, and I'll try and take them together to leave space for Edwin and any wrapping up by you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Brian. Hello, Brian.
Hello, Brian Mark, Jewish Students' Chaplaincy Scotland.
Nice
There is a number of small organisations in Scotland, like the Aberdeen Jewish community, that struggles to pay its affiliation fees. What I'm concerned about is that Skojec has been given a 50% reduction when Glasgow Jewish Representative Council is not, and when Aberdeen can't even afford to send a delegate. What I'd like to caution you that if one organisation is given a 50%, then every small organisation in the United Kingdom should withhold 50%. It's not fair for one if it's one for another, not when people are desperate to join the board and do not have the funds because of their small organisation to pay for it.
Brian, thank you very much. I understand where you're coming from. You may be, unbeknownst to yourself, slightly not entirely au fait with the underlying facts or the narrative, and I'm happy to speak to you offline. But the reality is that every organization is looked at one by one. We do have a coherent mechanism for this. I'm very happy to talk to you offline. Drop me an email, I'll call you and just bring you up to date. Thank you. Sid.
Can you hear me, Stuart?
Of course I can, and I'm delighted to see you. That's a very attractive blue-purple you're wearing.
Thank you very much, sir. Sheila's already touched on what you call a digital communication. I want to talk about community briefing, and hopefully maybe we can streamline the effort and make one go of it. You mentioned the board is under ever-increasing financial challenge, as indeed are so many other organisations in the current situation. I want to talk about community briefing because, this goes to not only deputies but also to what I call Lou the Jew in the pew. The ordinary rank and file person who pays or should be paying their communal contribution. And if you look at the community briefing as I've done over the last few weeks, the top part of it, absolutely excellent stuff that's in there. But the bottom part, which talks about a lot of, so many meetings that the various members of the board staff have had, all good stuff, but, that not exactly a catch-on for the Jew in the pew. And I wonder whether, we could take the opportunity to streamline it, to make it relevant so that the ordinary member of the Jewish public can actually see just what the board is doing, how it's relevant to them, and that it is absolutely essential. They can't afford not to pay the communal contribution. They really want to be part of it and to contribute to the board. And I think this is an opportunity which I commend to the board generally, maybe through yourself, to do a revamp of the community briefing.
I think that's very good. I think we'll pick this up under AOB on Tuesday when we have the FNO meeting, and I'll make sure that I speak to the relevant members of the senior management team. And by the way, Sid, thank you for your continuing work as head of the audit working group. You are one of about 30 deputies who, from different angles, not just FNO members, and I think it's important for all deputies to know this, particularly the newer ones, a very large number of deputies, as well as the senior management team, sees into our finances to varying degrees from different angles. And Sid, you're responsible for some of the most important work that we engage in, along with the working group that you head. And you're actually the member of the FNO whose research has been referred to in the divisional report, so thank you. Yeah, good stuff. If there are no more questions, I'll pass on the baton.
Yes, and just to say, it has been discussed, Sid, I quite agree with you about the look of the community briefing, and our website is being updated shortly, and the HOs know that the look of it, how it's presented, is going to change, and we should be making sure all of our media work, presentations, all of the things that people want to see and hear, to find a way to capture that. And I absolutely agree, it needs a bit of refreshment, and that has been discussed. So if you bear with us for a little bit, you will see some change. But thank you for that. We're running over time. I've got allowed a few minutes, and we need to make sure that, can we hear Edwin, please? Could you present your report?
Yeah, thank you, Marie. And
thank you. Apologies, Edwin. I shall make sure that you are first to give your report next time.
I'm delighted to present another bumper report reflecting the width of this division.
Can you speak up?
Yes, I apologize for all the events and activities that we could not include in this. We have a very enthusiastic and creative participants, and we're always having 26 members coming in to our division meetings, including semi-permanent observers. It has been a good week for Sephardim and Mizrahim this week, and I thank the board and its president and for including the Mizrahim as part of the narrative of the Jewish people. We commemorated 260. We accepted Harif today. Another strong Sephardi voices on the division, on the plenary. I also want to. We have the initiative on the Kaddish initiative on the 28th of November, and on the 30th, the commemoration of the day, and on the 1st of December, as mentioned by Sheila, an event I'd like to highlight in it. The person on the panel will be, one of the panel attendants will be the newly appointed senior chief rabbi of the United Arab Emirates, who will be speaking to us straight from Dubai. This is the new Middle East, and we welcome it. I am very happy to answer any of the division's queries and questions. Marie, I'm at your disposal.
Well, I also want to give credit for the wonderful work of Stephen Bush and the Commission for Inclusivity as well. That's cross-board, but Edwin's has certainly got more than his fair share to do with that. And I think during the whole time of the coronavirus, the volunteering and the events that we've done, they deserve a huge amount of credit, and especially all the interfaith activity. That's been truly amazing. Does anybody have any questions for Edwin? All right, thank you very much. And I'm told to say also for Thursday from Bruce Springberg that it will be Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving. Can I say, deputies, I feel that the organisation in its 260th year is going from strength to strength. Even today, we had record Zoom attendance of 206. We have admitted 2 new members. As I've said, we've got another 12 member organisations waiting to join the board. It's a fantastic place that we're in, that so many organisations want to join the board right across the whole diverse spectrum, across the denominations and across all of the different denominations of the Jewish community, and absolutely up and down the country. And that really is a testament to all of the work that deputies that you are involved with. It really is a huge credit. And I'm also pleased that we're seeing so many young people wanting to take their place, and such diverse thoughts and opinions. And I'm so proud that we can reach a broad consensus, and we are the envy of every faith community. And I really hope in 260 years' time that history will be very kind to us and all of the work that we've done, because I think we've really pulled together as a community to deal with anti-Semitism, one of the worst possible times after the Second World War. And I think it's a testament to all of the communal organisations, grassroots activists, everybody has really come together. And I have to pay testament to each and every one of you for your work. I will ask Gillian to arrange a coffee morning, because I think lots of people wanted to have an ability to ask questions, and I'm very happy to do that, and we can spend longer talking. So I wanted to thank you for your time today, and thank you for all that you're doing. And it's been a very good meeting, and it's been our privilege to have this meeting with you, and I wish all of you well. So thank you very much. If you wanted to unmute, you want to wave goodbye, I will say au revoir for now, and thank you again.